Your grandmother made a breakfast every morning that cost less than a penny. Scientists tested it in 2019 and couldn't believe what they found. We stopped eating it because an advert told us to. 12 breakfasts, 12 things that sat on British tables every single morning in the 1970s, never questioned, never written down, never given a second thought, that have now gone so completely it's as though they never existed. Number 9 on this list was eaten in over half of all British homes every week in 1971. Today, most people under 40 have never heard of it. Number 3 was handed over your butcher's counter for free, wrapped in paper still warm. And it turns out it had more iron and protein in it than anything Kellogg's ever put in a box. And number 1, your grandmother's breakfast, the one scientists tested and couldn't believe. We threw it away because a food company spent millions making your mum feel ashamed for serving it. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what was taken from you. And who decided to take it? Number 12, salt porridge. Not the porridge they sell now, not the kind in a little sachet with a picture of a Scottish glen on the front and the fruit already measured out for you. This was proper porridge. Thick, grey, almost solid in the pot, cooked low and slow in water. Always water, never milk. Milk was for the tea. With nothing but a good pinch of salt stirred through at the end. Your dad ate it without a word before the early shift. You ate it because your mum stood at the kitchen doorway and watched. Until the bowl was scraped clean and she was satisfied. You'd had something warm before you stepped outside. A bag of Scott's porridge oats from Quaker cost around 9p in 1971 and lasted a family of 4 nearly a fortnight of breakfasts. It wasn't pleasant exactly. For many children, it was a daily struggle. But on a January morning when the bedroom window had ice on the inside of the glass and the house wouldn't warm up until gone 9, that grey bowl was the only reliable thing. Between you and a thoroughly miserable day, flavoured sachets came along in the late 70s and told everyone that proper porridge was old-fashioned. Convenience won without much of a fight. What they never mentioned was that the salted version, cooked slowly, no shortcuts, kept your blood sugar steady in a way no instant packet ever managed. We just didn't have the language for it back then. And speaking of things that vanished, before anyone thought to mourn them, number 11 is something every kitchen on your street smelled of on a weekday morning. Number 11, fried bread in lard. You heard it before you reached the bottom of the stairs. That hard, aggressive sizzle, completely different from the gentle sound of butter. The moment bread hit the hot fat in the pan. Not butter, not oil from a bottle, lard. White, solid, proper rendered lard your mum kept in a ceramic pot with a lid right beside the hob. Scooped out with a dessert spoon like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. White, solid, proper rendered lard your mum kept in a ceramic pot with a lid right beside the hob. The bread went in pale and came out deep golden, almost dark at the edges, where the fat had done its work properly. Crisp on the outside, rich and soft in the middle, in a way that no slice of toast has ever come close to. A fried egg on top if there was one going spare, just a shake of salt if there wasn't. Lard cost around 8p for a 250-gram block in 1973, and kept a working man on his feet through a full morning without complaint. Then the health warnings arrived. The 1980s decided saturated fat was responsible for everything wrong with the country, and the lard pot was emptied, washed, and put at the back of the cupboard. Mothers switched to vegetable oil or stopped frying bread altogether. Doctors have since revised much of what they said back then. But habits don't return just because the science changes. The lard pot eventually ended up at a jumble sale, and that was that. And we haven't yet reached the breakfasts people are still quietly reluctant to admit they remember. Number 10 is one of those. Number 10, bloater paste on toast. A small glass jar, paper label, tin lid you worked off with a knife slid under the rim. Inside, a dark paste, brown, almost black in certain lights, made from smoked bloater herring, intensely savoury, with a smell that announced itself the moment the lid came off. Spread thickly on hot buttered toast. It hit you before you'd properly woken up. There was nothing gentle or apologetic about it. Shippers of Chichester made it. Number 9 will surprise you even more. In fishing communities along the Norfolk and Suffolk coast, in the port towns, in any household where fish was a natural part of daily life, bloater paste on toast was as unremarkable at breakfast as a pot of marmalade. The people who grew up with it never forgot that combination. The salt, the smoke, the firm toast underneath. Supermarkets gradually stopped giving shelf space to anything that didn't sell by the pallet load, and bloater paste quietly disappeared. Supermarkets gradually stopped giving shelf space to anything that didn't sell by the pallet load, and bloater paste quietly disappeared. You can still find it if you know where to look. Most people stopped looking a long time ago. But if you think bloater paste sounds like a stretch, number 9 will surprise you even more, because this one was in nearly every home in the country, and it's vanished just as completely. Number 9, dripping toast. Before anyone had heard of avocado, before smoked salmon became something ordinary people ate on a Tuesday, British children sat down to toast spread with beef dripping. The rendered fat saved from Sunday's roast, kept in a white ceramic pot where it set into pale, solid layers, streaked with dark brown jelly at the bottom. That jelly was the prize. Children scraped the toast hard across the pot, hoping to catch a smear of that dark, intensely savoury sediment beneath the white fat, a pinch of salt on top. Maybe a shake of pepper if your household was considered particular about such things. That was breakfast for sixpence. In 1974, over half of British households kept a dripping pot on the kitchen counter, or in the fridge, as a matter of course. It was simply what you did with the fat from the joint. Throwing it away would have seemed wasteful to the point of being slightly offensive. Then came the warnings about saturated fat, and the dripping pot was gone almost overnight. The science those warnings were based on has since been very significantly questioned, but the pot never came back. We're still 4 items away from the breakfast your butcher handed over for free, and we haven't even reached the one that divided households more sharply than almost anything else on this list. Number 8 did that. Number 8, sugar sandwiches. 2 slices of white bread, a spread of margarine, a generous layer of granulated sugar pressed between them and eaten straight away, before the sugar had a chance to dissolve properly into the margarine. In mining towns, mill towns and council estates across the North and the Midlands, sugar sandwiches appeared on breakfast plates without embarrassment or explanation. A £1 bag of Tate and Lyle granulated cost around 9p in 1972. The sandwich itself cost a penny to make. For a family where the weekly wage was £30 and the rent was £8, that penny mattered in a way that's hard to fully explain now. The crunch of the sugar against soft white bread before it melted on your tongue was genuinely satisfying in its own right. Not a poor substitute for something better, just its own honest thing. The shame came later. It arrived slowly through school, through television, through the rising idea that what was on your breakfast plate said something about your family's standing. Sugar sandwiches became something to keep quiet about, then something to deny, then something to forget entirely. They deserve better than that. And we're getting closer now. 3 items away from the breakfast the butcher gave your family for nothing. But number 7 first. Because number 7 is the one that defined British breakfast more than almost anything else. Number 7, Kippers. The smell came first, always the smell. That sharp, distinctive, deep smokiness of herring that had been cold smoked for hours. It came through the ceiling from the kitchen before you'd opened your eyes properly, and on a Saturday morning in 1973, you could smell your neighbour's kippers as clearly as your own through the walls of a terrace. They came wrapped in paper from the fishmonger on the high street, or in a vacuum pack from the co-op if your town had one. You grilled them or lowered them into a jug of just boiled water. The jug method was meant to keep the smell contained, though it never really worked, and nobody minded much. They came to the table golden brown and glistening, with brown bread and proper butter, and a strong pot of tea alongside. That was a British weekend in 1973. Over 40 million kippers eaten every single year. 1 generation later, almost entirely gone. No single thing killed them. It was everything together. Open-plan kitchens that couldn't manage the smell, the bones that took patience, the time they needed. The generation who ate them every weekend without thinking grew older, and their children never picked up the habit because nobody taught them, and the fishmonger had closed anyway. We lost one of the most complete breakfasts this country ever produced because it was inconvenient and the world had got faster. And we still haven't reached number 3, the one that cost nothing. But first, number 6, and this is the one that even now people mention in a lowered voice. Number 6, bread and condensed milk. The tin with the red and gold label. That thick, slow, sweet milk that came out in ribbons when you tipped it and never quite poured. It moved more like syrup than anything you'd call milk. Your nan kept one in the back of the cupboard at all times, alongside the tinned peaches she was saving and the spam that had been there since about 1968, a thick slice of soft white bread spread generously with the sweetness, folded in half, eaten over the sink, or standing at the kitchen table before anyone else was properly up. A tin of Nestlé condensed milk cost around 18p in 1974. One tin covered several mornings. For children, it felt like an occasion. Something sweet before school felt like getting away with something. For mothers, it was simpler than that. It was calories. It was something in their children's stomachs when there wasn't much else available. Nobody called it what it was out loud. That was the unspoken agreement of the whole era. You ate it, and you were grateful, and you didn't discuss what the tin on the table meant about the week your family was having. By the 1990s, condensed milk had retreated entirely into baking. Today, a tin on the counter means you're making a cheesecake. Nobody thinks breakfast. And we are now just one item away from number 3, the breakfast the butcher handed over for free. But number 4 comes first, and number 4 is the one that disappeared so quietly that most people aren't even sure it was ever real. Number 4, oat biscuits soaked in tea. Plain oat biscuits, rich tea. Sometimes a digestive if the week had been reasonable. Dropped into a mug of strong builder's tea and left just long enough to soften through without losing their shape entirely and sinking to the bottom. That was breakfast for a generation of British men who didn't have time for anything more or couldn't face solid food before 6:30 in the morning. It sounds like almost nothing. It was almost nothing in terms of effort and cost. A packet of rich tea cost around 11p in 1975, and the tea was already made. But the ritual of it, both hands around the mug, the careful timing, the precise moment you had to lift the biscuit before it gave way. That was the point. Warm, familiar, reliable, requiring nothing from you before you'd woken up enough to face the day. When cereal bars and breakfast pots on the go arrived in the 1990s, this quiet daily habit simply stopped without ceremony. Nobody marked it going. And now we're here. Number 3. The breakfast that cost your family nothing at all. Number 3. Bread and scratchings. The butcher handed them over the counter without being asked. Pork scratchings, the crisp, salty, deeply flavoured skin left over from the butchering process, were a byproduct in the 1970s that most local butchers couldn't sell in any formal sense, so regular customers simply received them. Wrapped in a piece of brown paper, still faintly warm, passed across the counter along with whatever you'd actually come in for. You brought them home, and your mum put them on the table with a loaf of bread and a pot of tea. The flavour was unlike anything that comes in a packet today. Salty and deep, and with a particular crunch that had actual substance behind it. Not the thin, artificial crispness of something manufactured, but the real texture of something that had been properly rendered. For families in 1974 managing on a careful budget, a free bag of scratchings alongside a loaf that cost 13p was a morning sorted for nothing. The supermarket killed the local butcher across the course of the 1980s. The butcher went, and so did the paper bag on the counter, and nobody thought to replace either of them because nobody understood at the time what was actually being lost. And now we're at number 1. The breakfast your grandmother made every single morning. The one that cost less than a penny. The one scientists tested in 2019 and couldn't quite believe what they found. Number 1. Bread and bone broth. Stale bread, the heel of the loaf, the slices that had gone slightly hard overnight and weren't really right for anything else. Torn into rough chunks and laid in a wide bowl, then covered with hot bone broth, ladled straight from the pot that had been sitting on the back of the stove since the night before. A pinch of salt, sometimes a small scraping of dripping on top if there was any left, nothing else. That was it. In working homes across Britain through the 1960s and into the 1970s, this appeared on the table without ceremony or apology. It used bread that would otherwise go in the bin. It used stock that was already made from bones that had already given everything they had to the previous night's supper. In real terms, it cost nothing. Not nearly nothing. Actually nothing. A team of nutritionists examining historical British diets published their findings in 2019. What they found in that bowl, the collagen from the slow-cooked bones, the B vitamins, the iron, the genuine bioavailable protein in the broth, is precisely what the supplement industry now spends hundreds of millions of pounds annually trying to put back into the diet of a population that stopped eating like this 2 generations ago. Collagen supplements, bone broth powders, vitamin B complex in a foil packet, £30 a jar. Your grandmother made all of it for nothing on a Tuesday morning in a council house in Leeds or Coventry or Glasgow, and she didn't know she was doing anything worth preserving. She was simply feeding her family with what was there. That was the whole of it. No recipe, no method, no name for what she was doing beyond just getting on with things. Kelloggs spent £4 million in 1978 alone on advertisements telling her generation that what they cooked every morning belonged to harder times. That modern families ate from boxes. That standing over a stove before 7 in the morning was something to move away from, not something to pass on. It worked. Your mum stopped making it. Her mum eventually stopped too. And the knowledge, not just the recipe, but the entire understanding that a bowl of bread and broth was worth more than a box of cornflakes, that knowledge went with them. We didn't lose these breakfasts by accident. We were persuaded out of them, one advertisement at a time, by an industry that needed us to forget our grandmothers were right. They were right. Tell me in the comments which one your family still made, or which one you'd completely forgotten about until just now.